Radio Rahim with Max Kellerman. One of these special occasions we get to catch you ringside, and there's so much going on in boxing that I want to talk to you a little bit about the business of it. Right? I spoke to Bevel earlier today, and the rematch with Canelo is clearly not happening next, but it seems to be an issue of business. Canelo wants the exact same deal he had the first time, even though he lost the first fight. How does that strike you?
Canelo in recent years has insisted on a certain pay structure for opponents that has prevented, probably been the reason more than any, that we haven't seen the fights we wanted to see him in. We have seen Canelo fight plausible opponents. That guy has a belt, he wants to unify at super middle, et cetera, but not the fighters that we really have wanted to see him fight. Fight Charlo, fight Benavidez, fight Beterbiev. What's odd about that, though, is he chooses, when he does fight like one of the very top guys, the guy who you would put him in with to get him beat. If you wanted to get Canelo beat, you put him in with Bivol. Right? It's the worst possible style for him. And so probably that was economics too, right? It might be cheaper to pay him than it would be to pay, say, Benavidez, who brings a following to the table. If I were in Canelo's camp, I would advise him not to take the rematch.
Everyone's talking about this super fight, Final Four possible, top four heavyweights. It looks like Wilder and Joshua are going to go ahead and make this thing happen, but it doesn't become the kind of once-in-a-lifetime night unless we get Fury and Usyk on the same night. And as much as Usyk appears to want the fight, Tyson is now being accused of ducking this fight one way or another. Either, he won't take the deal, he keeps moving the bar forward. How do you see Tyson Fury's kind of resistance to an undisputed heavyweight championship fight?
Yeah, I can't explain it. I don't think, Tyson Fury kept taking fights with Deontay Wilder. I don't think he's scared. Let's put it that way. He's 6'9". He boxes like a lightweight. He has gotten off the deck late in fights against maybe the biggest single shot puncher ever and won the fights, once by knockout, right, off the deck. His behavior's been odd on social media. And you would think, well, it's good promotional stuff because it generates interest, except he's teasing the fans and then not making the fight. So I couldn't tell you why. I can say I'd make him the favorite against anyone in the world. And I think he is the heavyweight champion of the world, although, unlike a lot of instances, Usyk has a legitimate dispute. Like when Lomachenko was lightweight champ, I even told Devin Haney, I know you didn't get your title shot, but I don't really think you have a legitimate case that Lomachenko's not undisputed. Because he beat the guys who had any claim to the championship, and then because he didn't defend against you, he got stripped because he was made the super duper champion or whatever ridiculous thing. So Haney in his mind had a claim, but I didn't think he did. I thought he was just a number one contender. But Usyk has an actual claim to the title. Because if you follow the lineage, yes, Vladimir Klitschko was the lineal champion when Fury beat him. But then Fury said he retired, he left the sport. And in his absence, a consensus formed around Anthony Joshua, who beat the same guy that Fury did, but more convincingly because he knocked him out. So that consensus champion was Joshua, who lost ultimately to Usyk, right? That's what Usyk has. Fury has the lineal claim, but it's not like Usyk doesn't have a real claim to the title. So Fury can't call himself the undisputed champion until he faces and beats Usyk. And for that reason, I expect the fight to happen, and I don't have a good answer as to why he seems to not be very hot on making the fight.
Two more. We just saw Garcia, Davis, huge fight, big pay-per-view numbers, no titles on the line. The undisputed title is held by Haney. Mm-hmm. And when I saw Shakur talking about what's the biggest fight, it's him and Davis. Is that indeed the biggest fight, even if there were no titles on the line? And why in the business of boxing can an undisputed fighter like Haney not be considered a big draw or the biggest draw in his division?
Oh, that's always been the case in boxing. You could have a star who's not the champion. Jerry Cooney got parity with Larry Holmes, and Jerry Cooney hadn't beaten anyone in his prime, and Larry Holmes had cleaned out the heavyweight division, right? So if you can attract the fight, and part of it, there was a racial component to it and everything, but part of it was also Larry Holmes was following Muhammad Ali, who was the biggest star ever, and Holmes didn't have the same personality or the same kind of flashy style. And Cooney, yes, again, there was a racial component. He got, white America, but he was also a big left-handed puncher, or a big left hooker who destroyed Kenny Norton and these guys, and so generated interest there. So he got parity with Larry Holmes. That happens. And Tank has captured the imagination of the boxing public and also the sporting public, and therefore is in the driver's seat in negotiation, even though Haney is the champ. So, like this is Tank has never been the champion of any division. Think about that. He's never beaten the man in any division. And yet he has belts and belts. And so I think he can beat champions. I think Tank is going to be remembered as a great fighter when all is said and done. But he hadn't done that yet. They've been very careful the way they moved him, and he's never really won the title. So, yeah, him fighting Haney would be good.
Like you say, there's a time in boxing where you can always say that there's a guy who has the title who's not the most popular, but have we reached an era in boxing where the belts themselves are not really what fighters are going for?
Well, this is why I've always said, let's pay attention to who the actual champion is, right? And I think that movement has gotten some momentum in the last, I've been doing this now, professionally for 25 years. In the last quarter century, it started, people, Brian Kenny and others were pulling in the same direction, and guys at HBO and Jim Lampley and people started kind of accepting this lineal idea and the Ring Magazine Championship. But the reason I did, because the belts have always just been promotional tools. There's nothing, it's not some sanctified, it's sanctioned, but not sanctified. That's why, they're just promotional tools. So once you establish who the champion is, you can follow the lineage, right? And that's significant to boxing purists. But as for the belts, they're just promotional tools that sanctioning bodies have there for promoters to pump up a fight.
And lastly, of course, the biggest fight that can be made in boxing, and probably the biggest night that can be made in sports. We're right on the cusp of that, July 29th, with Spence and Crawford. Again, these guys are doing something that everybody wants to see them do, but at the end of that night, is it just the biggest fight and the biggest event in boxing, or do we then have the pound-for-pound number one by definition in boxing because of the size of the fight?
Come on. Whoever wins this fight, unless it's a bad fight somehow, which I don't see possible, is clearly the best pound-for-pound fighter in boxing. Who has a claim other than the winner of this fight, Sugar Ray Leonard and Tommy Hearns fight. The winner of that fight's the best pound-for-pound fighter in boxing, If Pacquiao and Floyd had gotten it on earlier, but even so, it was still the same, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, these are the winner of apologies to Fulton and Inoue, I get it. Yeah, the winner of this fight's the best pound-for-pound fighter, pretty clearly.
To play devil's advocate, even Canelo, I realize he's not undefeated like these guys, but multiple weight divisions, multiple belts, titles, undisputed. Does he not still have a claim, even if, whoever wins, Crawford or Spence?
Had Canelo beaten, let's say, in recent years, Charlo and then Benavidez, and now we're heading into a better Biev fight, right? And you want to say sure. That's not what happened, though, So, no, I don't think Canelo has a claim to best pound for pound. Although were he to have a couple wins like that, sure. Spence, Terrence Crawford was, cleaned out 140 pounds. If you move up to welterweight and beat the best guy there after you've cleaned out the other division, not because this fight is convenient or this guy has a belt, but you just beat every fighter who's there, it's tough to argue against that.
Almost everybody I speak to, as much as they want to see the fight, say Crawford, immediately. Yeah. They're not even debating it. Are they making a mistake?
Well, time will tell. In the end, if you make me pick, I'll pick Crawford. But it's one of those fights like Leonard and Hearns where, I was a Sugar Ray Leonard fan, and I remember reading an article where Emmanuel Stewart was explaining why Tommy Hearns was going to win. And when he was explaining, I'm a little kid reading this going, he's right. What the hell is Sugar Ray Leonard going to do to win this fight, right? Like, how do you can't box with a guy. You can't get inside the right hand. If you do, and you somehow, then he'll outbox you. That's how it is like with Spence. Like, yeah, you're going to beat Spence, right? Well, wait a minute. High volume puncher who can also box and beat you behind a southpaw jab at distance with defense and footwork and a jab, has a great chin, has a very high work rate. There's mustard on all those shots, head and body. How do you beat that guy? Well, Sugar Ray Leonard figured it out. Crawford's the type of dude to figure it out. And I think that's why he's the slight favorite, maybe.
Do you think that people are making a mistake as a foregone conclusion, what do people see in Crawford that make them think that he's just going to beat Spence no matter what?
I don't know that people think he's going to beat Spence no matter what.
I mean,
I think it's a 50-50 fight, and if there's a very slight favorite, maybe it's Crawford.
What are we looking for early in the fight to let us know that it's going his way? What does he have to do to get that win?
I think it's probably going to go Spence's way early, right? Like that's what people anticipate. The question is, what does Spence do to the adjustments Crawford makes? I don't think we understand this fight in round 3. We understand it in round 7 and 8. Yeah.
We see this thing 3 times.
Hopefully.
2 out of 3. Who wins it?
If you make me choose someone, I'm not picking against Crawford because I think Crawford has the fastest processor in boxing. I think he's able to, at that level, when guys are both fast twitchy, when guys both, have shown that they can overcome adversity of one kind or another, when they're both complete fighters and they can fight on their front foot or their back foot, they can move, they can, in Crawford's case, he can switch up. When they can take a good shot and box from distance at all 3 distances, et cetera, it comes down, and they both have heart, it comes down to who can think a little quicker. And I think Crawford probably has the best boxing IQ right now. So in a 50-50 fight, if you're going to make me say who's 51, I give it to Crawford.
And I know you got to go, so this really is the last one. Lomachenko, his reaction to losing on the night that he got robbed. Obviously, we saw him in tears. What do you think of that decision and his claim that he was robbed? And then where does he go from here?
I don't think he got robbed. I think that there were 2 decisive rounds in the fight, the 10th and 11th. Both went to Lomachenko. There were like 6 or 7. So how many swing rounds were there in that fight? You could have gone 116, 112 either way. There were a ton of swing rounds. So I can't call it a robbery. I had Lomachenko winning. When I watched it live and I was scoring from a distance because of where the perch was, where we were set up in Vegas, I had the 12th round for Loma. Close. I watched it again on tape. I had the 12th round for Haney, close. But I flipped it originally live. I gave the first round to Haney. When I watched it on tape, I gave the first round to Loma and had Loma 7-5. You could have gone either way. The problem in boxing, as I said on my show Max on Boxing on ESPN2, is that all rounds, unless there's a knockdown, basically are 10-9. So it's like a football game where one team wins the first quarter by a field goal, the other team wins the second quarter by a touchdown, and at the half, it's tied somehow, right? The problem people had with that fight is Loma won 2 rounds late in the fight, clearly. And those are the only 2 clear rounds in the fight. So people are like, oh, Loma won. Why? Because he won those 2 rounds? If fights were scored the way they ought to be scored, and no even rounds, then super close rounds should be 10-9 one way or another, and decisive rounds should be 10-8, and lopsided rounds should be 10-7, but that's not the way fights are scored.
Does it matter who the champion is? Does a tie round go to the champion or a very close one?
Sure, you can make a sport however you want it. Baseball just changed the rules to make a better product. That would encourage challengers to, like Lomachenko, in this case, to, step on it a little bit late in the fight. In the 12th round, he had an amateur mentality where he felt like he must have hit Haney with this part of his glove enough times that he had an insurmountable lead. He did not. He sat on a lead in the 12th round, and it cost him. Go out and win the 12th round, and then you win the fight.
Does that measure into your metric, who the champion is on those close rounds when you're scoring?
No, but if you tell me that it does for you, sure. In other words, there are so many rounds in boxing that are legitimately like even rounds. You can't say you would have rather been one guy than the other because very little actually happened, right? Lots happened, but in terms of landed punches. So if you say in those rounds where it's really even and I have to make a call, I feel the challenger wasn't aggressive enough to take it from the champion, okay, at least you're being consistent.
Well, I will say there is no tie with you. You're one of the best and most fun to talk to analysts in boxing. So I appreciate the time. I know it's late. Thank you so much. Radio Rahim with Max Kellerman.